I have been sending you $1,500 a month for rent, my grandfather said right in the middle of Thanksgiving dinner. The air vanished from the room. My mother dropped her fork against her china plate, a sound like a hammer hitting a casket. My father smiled the way someone does when trying to smother a fire with a napkin. I just stared. I had never seen a dime. So where had that money gone for the last 5 years? My name is Harper Rodriguez, and as I sat in the corner of my parents' dining room, I felt less like a daughter and more like a prop they had dragged out of storage to complete the set dressing. The house in the quiet suburbs of Connecticut was unrecognizable. I had been away for years, keeping my distance for the sake of my own sanity, but guilt has a funny way of reeling you back in for the holidays. When I walked through the front door, I expected the same worn beige carpets and the faint smell of old potpourri that had defined my childhood. Instead, I walked into a showroom. The kitchen had been gutted and reborn as a gleaming temple of white marble and stainless steel. There was a massive island that could seat 8, topped with a slab of quartz that probably cost 3 months of my salary. The appliances were all professional grade, the kind of 6-burner stove you see on cooking shows. Not in the home of a mid-level insurance adjuster and a part-time interior decorator. The lighting was recessed and smart-controlled. Everything smelled like lemon polish and new money. I sat at the far end of the long mahogany table, nursing a glass of water because I did not trust myself with wine. My mother, Elaine, was fluttering around the kitchen island, plating roasted vegetables with a frantic energy that made me nervous just watching her. My father, Graham Mercer, was already seated, polishing his glasses with a silk handkerchief, his eyes darting toward the head of the table. That was where Franklin Hart sat. My grandfather was a legend in the business world, a self-made billionaire who had built a logistics empire from a single delivery truck. He was also a ghost. In my 30-odd years of life, I had seen him perhaps 10 times. He sent generic cards with checks on birthdays, and he occasionally called to check if we were still alive. But he did not do family dinners. He certainly did not do Thanksgiving in the suburbs. Yet here he was. His presence turned the air in the room heavy, like the drop in pressure before a tornado touches down. He was nearly 80, but he looked 60. He wore a charcoal cashmere sweater that fit him perfectly, and his silver hair was combed back with military precision. He sat with a stillness that commanded attention without demanding it. The dynamic in the room was pathetic. My parents were performing. It was a high-stakes theater production, and they were terrified of missing a cue. My sister, Kendall, sat across from me. She was perfect. Of course. Her hair was blown out in soft waves. Her dress was new, and she was smiling that tight, practiced smile she used when she wanted something. She looked at me once, her eyes scanning my off-the-rack blouse and my scuffed boots under the table, and dismissed me with a slight twitch of her nose. "The turkey looks magnificent, Elaine," Franklin said. His voice was a low rumble, devoid of the frantic pitch the rest of us seemed to be operating on. My mother nearly dropped the serving spoon. "Oh, thank you, Daddy. We went to that organic farm upstate." Graham insisted, "Only the best for today." "It's dry-aged," my father added, leaning forward too eagerly. 48 hours in a brine. It makes all the difference." Franklin nodded slowly, cutting a precise square of meat. He took a bite, chewed methodically, and swallowed. "Acceptable," he said. My parents exhaled, as if they had just defused a bomb. I kept my head down, pushing a singular green bean around my plate. I felt like an imposter. I lived in a studio apartment 40 minutes away where the radiator clanked all night and the water pressure was a suggestion rather than a reality. I worked at Bright Harbor Compliance Group, burying my nose in regulatory paperwork for 10 hours a day just to keep my head above water. Sitting here, surrounded by this sudden, unexplained opulence, I felt a familiar cocktail of shame and resentment rising in my throat. "Harper," Franklin said. The sound of my name made me jump. I looked up. His steel-gray eyes were locked on mine. He was not looking at me with the disdain I got from Kendall or the disappointment I got from my father. He was just looking, observing. "Sir," I said, I had never called him Grandpa. He had never asked me to. "You look thin," he observed. It was not an insult. It was a statement of fact. "Are you eating well?" "I'm fine," I lied. "Just busy. Work is intense right now." "Bright Harbor, correct?" he asked. I was surprised he knew the name. "Yes, I'm in compliance. We're handling a merger right now, so the hours are long." "Compliance is good work," Franklin said, taking a sip of his wine. "It requires attention to detail, integrity. I respect that." My father cleared his throat loudly. "She's barely making ends meet. Frank, you know how it is. Entry-level wages." "I've been there for 5 years. Dad," I said, my voice tighter than I intended. "I'm a senior analyst." Graham waved a hand dismissively. "Well, sure, titles are free, but the cost of living, right? It's brutal out there." "It is," Franklin agreed. He set his wine glass down. He did not look away from me. "That is exactly why I wanted to make sure you were stable. I know the city is expensive. I remember my first apartment in Queens. I had to choose between heat and food in the winter of 1962. He offered me a small, rare smile. It was the first time I had ever felt seen by him. For a second, the tension in my shoulders dropped. Maybe this wouldn't be a disaster. Maybe he actually cared. "It's been hard," I admitted, lowering my guard just an inch. "But I'm managing. I'm okay." Franklin nodded. "I am glad to hear that. I wanted to ensure the assistance was actually making a difference. I know it's not a fortune, but in this economy, every bit helps." I frowned. "Assistance." The room went quiet. The only sound was the hum of the sub-zero refrigerator in the background. "The stipend," Franklin said, casually picking up his fork again. "I have been sending you $1,500 a month for rent." The words hung in the air, heavy and nonsensical. I blinked. I replayed the sentence in my head, trying to make the math work. $1,500 a month for rent. My rent was $1,600. I paid it every single first of the month. I paid it by picking up extra shifts. I paid it by eating instant oatmeal for dinner 3 times a week. I paid it by skipping the dentist when my molar cracked last year. The word stuck in my throat. I looked at Franklin, confusion written plainly on my face. "Grandfather, what are you talking about?" Franklin paused. The fork hovered halfway to his mouth. He lowered it slowly to the plate. The metallic clink was deafening. He looked at me, really looked at me, searching for any sign of deception. "The checks," he said, his voice dropping an octave, losing its warmth. "I have set up a direct transfer, $1,500, every month, for the last 5 years, to help you with your housing." My stomach bottomed out. The world tilted on its axis. 5 years, I whispered. "Since you left home," he said. "I have never received a penny from you." I said. The words came out before I could filter them. They were raw and honest. The silence that followed was absolute. It was a vacuum. Suddenly, the chair to my right scraped violently against the hardwood floor. My father, Graham, stood up. His face flushed a deep, alarming shade of red. He laughed, but it was a jagged, manic sound. "She is confused," Graham shouted, practically throwing his body between me and Franklin's line of sight. "She doesn't mean that. Frank, you know Harper. She's not good with numbers. She forgets things." "I don't forget $1,500 a month." "Dad," I said, my voice rising, trembling with a mix of shock and dawning horror. I stood up too. "I have never seen that money, ever." "We are holding it for you," Graham yelled, his hands making wild gestures in the air. "We are managing it. You know you're unstable. Harper, you would have blown it on stupid things. We are building a nest egg. We are protecting you from yourself." I looked at him. I looked at the man who had told me, 5 years ago, that I was a burden. The man who had told me to get out of his house because he was tired of paying for my mistakes that were nothing more than me wanting to go to a state college instead of the expensive private one they had picked out for Kendall. "You're holding it," I repeated, $90,000. You're holding $90,000 for me, Graham stammered. Well, minus expenses, management fees, taxes, we put it into the house to increase the value of the estate, which will be yours one day. It's an investment. Franklin did not move. He did not stand up. He did not shout. He simply sat there, his hands resting flat on the table, on either side of his plate. The warmth was completely gone from his face. He looked like a statue carved from ice. He turned his head slowly, ignoring my father's frantic babbling, and looked at my mother. Elaine was frozen near the oven. She was gripping a dish rag so tightly her knuckles were white. She wasn't looking at me. She wasn't looking at her husband. She was staring at the floor, her chest heaving in short, shallow breaths. Franklin's voice was barely a whisper, but it carried to every corner of the room. Graham, sit down. Frank, listen. You have to understand the context. Sit down. The command was absolute. My father collapsed back into his chair, deflated, wiping sweat from his upper lip. Franklin looked at me again. The kindness was gone, replaced by a terrifying clarity. He was a man who built an empire by spotting inefficiencies, by rooting out theft, by understanding exactly how things moved from point A to point B. He had just realized that his delivery had been intercepted. You have been paying your own rent? Franklin asked me. Yes, I said. Tears stung my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. Every month, for 5 years, I worked 2 jobs sometimes. I didn't know you were helping me. I see, Franklin said. He picked up his napkin, folded it neatly, and placed it on the table. He looked at the renovations surrounding us, the marble, the high-end lighting, the expensive art on the walls. He looked at Kendall's designer dress. He looked at the wine in his glass. He was doing the math. I sent that money for my granddaughter's survival, Franklin said to the room, his voice devoid of emotion. Not for a kitchen remodel. Daddy, please, my mother whimpered. It was a small, broken sound. I looked at her. I looked at the woman who had birthed me. I wanted her to look at me. I wanted her to say it was a mistake. I wanted her to defend me. I wanted to see apologies in her eyes. I wanted to see a mother's love, or at least a mother's guilt for watching her daughter struggle while she sat in a renovated palace. Elaine lifted her head and met my gaze. There was no love there. There was no apology. Her eyes were wide and glossy, darting back and forth between me and her father. It was the look of a trapped animal. It was the look of someone who wasn't sorry for what she had done, but was terrified of the consequences. She wasn't looking at her daughter. She was looking at the witness who was about to destroy her life, for the first time in 5 years. I didn't feel like the disappointment of the family. As I looked at the fear in my mother's eyes, I realized the power dynamic had shifted. I wasn't the one with the secret anymore. The silence stretched out, agonizing and thick, broken only by the hum of the refrigerator that my rent money had likely paid for. The silence at the table was not just an absence of noise, it was a physical weight, pressing down on my chest, forcing the air from my lungs until I felt lightheaded. My mother's eyes were still fixed on my grandfather, wide and terrified, while my father dabbed at his forehead with a napkin that cost more than my weekly grocery budget. But as I looked at them, the gleaming white kitchen dissolved. The smell of roasted turkey and expensive sage stuffing faded, replaced by the scent of mildew and old cardboard. My mind violently rewound 5 years. I was standing in the hallway of this house, but it looked different then. The walls were a scuffed beige. The carpet was worn thin by the front door, and the air smelled of stale coffee. I was 22 years old, holding a duffel bag that contained everything I owned. I wasn't leaving because I wanted to explore the world. I was leaving because I had been suffocated. The argument that day hadn't even been about anything significant. It was the accumulation of 1,000 tiny cuts. I had asked why Kendall, who had dropped out of 2 different community colleges, was getting a new car while I was being asked to pay rent to live in my own childhood bedroom after graduating with honors. My father had stood at the bottom of the stairs, arms crossed, looking at me with that familiar mix of disappointment and exhaustion. You are being unreasonable. Harper, he had said. His voice was calm, which made it worse. Kendall needs the help. She is sensitive. She needs a leg up to get her confidence back. You are a survivor. You are smart. Then came the sentence that had haunted me for 1,800 nights. You can handle it, he said. You don't need us the way she does. It's time you stand on your own 2 feet. We need the space for your sister. It was an eviction notice wrapped in a compliment. They kicked me out not because I was bad, but because I was competent enough to survive the fall. I remembered walking out to my rusted sedan, throwing the bag in the back seat, and waiting for one of them to come to the porch, to wave, to say they loved me. The door just clicked shut. That was the beginning of the darkness. I moved into a studio apartment in a neighborhood where the police sirens were the primary lullaby. It was 400 square feet of peeling paint and drafty windows. The rent was $1,200 a month, which was a steal for the area, but it took nearly 60% of my take-home pay at the time. I was working as a junior clerk at a small logistics firm, making coffee and filing papers, desperate to get my foot in the door of the corporate world. But the rent wasn't the killer. It was the body I was born with. 6 months after I left home, I was diagnosed with a chronic autoimmune disorder. It wasn't life-threatening if managed, but managed was a word that carried a heavy price tag. I needed specialists. I needed blood work every quarter. I needed synthetic hormones that my insurance deemed a Tier 3 pharmaceutical, meaning my copay was astronomical. I remembered sitting on the floor of that studio apartment, wrapped in a blanket because I couldn't afford to turn the heat past 60 degrees. I had a calculator on my phone and a stack of bills spread out on the cheap linoleum. Rent, student loans, electric, insurance, medication. The numbers never added up. They were always in the red. To survive. I stopped sleeping. I took a second job at a diner called The Night Owl, 3 towns over. It was a place that smelled permanently of fryer grease and despair. I worked the graveyard shift, from 8 p.m. to 2 a.m., 3 nights a week, then drove home, slept for 4 hours, and went to my office job. I could still feel the phantom sensation of my feet swelling inside my non-slip shoes. I could feel the burn of hot coffee splashing on my wrist when a drunk patron grabbed my arm. I remembered the exhaustion that settled deep in my bones, a cold ache that never went away. I spent my breaks in the back alley, sitting on a milk crate, reading study guides for my compliance certification under the flickering light of a street lamp. I knew that certification was my only way out, my only ticket to a salary that didn't require me to serve pancakes at midnight. I was drowning, and I was doing it alone. There was one night, about 2 years into my exile, that broke me. My car needed a new alternator, and my pharmacy had raised the price of my medication by $40. I had $11 in my checking account. I sat in my car in the parking lot of the pharmacy, gripping the steering wheel, sobbing until I couldn't breathe. I swallowed my pride. I picked up the phone. I called the house phone. My father answered. "Hello." "Dad, it's me," I said, my voice cracking. "I'm in trouble. The car broke down, and I need to pick up my prescription. I just need $500. I'll pay you back. I promise. I just need a bridge." There was a pause on the line. I heard the television in the background. I heard laughter. "Harper," he sighed, the sound of a man burdened by a nuisance. "We talked about this. You wanted your independence. We are on a tight budget right now. The roof needed repairs, and your mother needed that dental work. We just don't have the liquidity. Please," I begged. "I have no one else. Don't be dependent." "Harper," he said, his voice hardening. "It's ugly. Figure it out. It builds character." He hung up. I slept in my car that night because I didn't have the gas to get back to my apartment and back to work the next morning. I shook my head, clearing the memory, and the gleaming kitchen of the present slammed back into focus. I looked at the island. It wasn't just marble. It was Carrara marble. I knew because I had priced it once for a client's renovation budget audit. That slab alone cost more than my car. I looked at the stove, a Wolf dual fuel range, $8,000, minimum. I looked at my mother's wrist. A tennis bracelet glittered under the recessed lighting. "We don't have the liquidity," he had said. "We are tight right now," he had said. I felt a coldness spread through my chest that had nothing to do with the temperature. It was the chill of absolute clarity. They hadn't just abandoned me. That I could have handled. I had handled that. I had processed the grief of being unloved and moved on. No, this was something far more sinister. If Franklin was telling the truth, and Franklin Hart did not lie about money, then $1,500 had been deposited into an account every single month for 60 months. $90,000. When I was shivering in my apartment, choosing between heat and medicine, there was $1,500. When I was scrubbing dried syrup off diner tables at 1 a.m, fighting to keep my eyes open, there was $1,500. When I was crying in the pharmacy parking lot, begging for a lifeline, there was $1,500. They hadn't just refused to help me. They had intercepted the help that was sent. My father's claim that they were holding it for me was a lie so transparent it was insulting. You don't hold an investment by renovating your kitchen. You don't manage a nest egg by buying a new SUV, which I had noticed in the driveway but hadn't commented on. You don't protect someone's future by letting them starve in the present. I looked at Kendall. She was staring at her fingernails, refusing to meet my eyes. She knew. Of course she knew. "You said," I started, my voice sounding strange to my own ears. It was too calm. It was the voice of the compliance officer I had become, the woman who hunted down fraud for a living. "You told me the house was falling apart. You told me you were struggling." "We were," my mother squeaked. "Harper, honey, overhead is expensive. The taxes in this town, you don't understand homeownership." "I understand math," I said. "And I understand that $1,500 a month covers the mortgage on this house. Grandpa wasn't just sending rent for me. He was paying for your lifestyle." A horrible realization hit me. I wasn't just the black sheep. I was the golden goose. They needed me to be the failure. They needed me to be the struggling, unstable daughter who couldn't manage her finances. Because as long as I was struggling, Franklin would keep sending the checks. As long as I was the charity case, the money kept flowing. If I had succeeded, if I had told Franklin 5 years ago that I was doing fine, the money might have stopped, or he might have sent it directly to me. They had a vested interest in my poverty. My suffering was their revenue stream. I looked at my hands. They were shaking, not from fear, but from a rage so pure it felt like a holy fire. "Who signed for it?" I asked. The question hung in the air. Franklin shifted in his seat. He was watching me with a new expression. Respect. "It was a direct deposit," Franklin said, "to an account under the name Harper Rodriguez, but the account had a joint signatory for management purposes, intended for emergencies." "I never opened an account with you," I said to my father. Graham licked his lips. "When you were 18, we opened a joint savings. Remember, for college funds?" I vaguely remembered. A dormant account with $20 in it that I had forgotten existed a decade ago. "So you reactivated a dead account," I said, piecing it together. "You received the transfers, and then what? You just swiped the card." "We managed the household," Graham shouted, slamming his hand on the table, trying to regain control by volume. "We are a family. Money is fluid in a family. You were eating ramen. Sure, but look at this house. This is your legacy. When we die, this is all yours." "I don't want your house," I said. "I wanted my rent." I looked at the food on my plate, the dry-aged turkey, the organic vegetables. It all looked like ash. I had been starving, literally starving, while they feasted on my name. My eyes drifted to the corner of the room where a new oversized flat-screen television was mounted. I thought about the text message I got from Kendall 3 months ago, sending me a picture of her new baby, a French bulldog puppy that cost $3,000. She had asked me if I could Venmo her $50 for dog food because she was a little short. I had sent it. I had sent her $50 from my grocery budget because I thought I was the one who had to be the responsible big sister. I felt sick. 60 months, I whispered. Every month was a choice they made. Every single month. For 5 years. A notification popped up on my father's phone: deposit received. $1,500. And every single month, he looked at that notification, thought of his daughter scrubbing dishes at a diner, and transferred the money to himself. He did it 60 times. My mother did it 60 times. They watched me drown 60 times, and 60 times they stole the life preserver. I pushed my chair back. The sound was harsh in the silent room. "I need to see the records," Franklin said. His voice was no longer the voice of a grandfather. It was the voice of the CEO who fired people for stealing paperclips, let alone embezzlement. "Dad, it's Thanksgiving," Elaine pleaded. "Can't we just discuss this later? Harper is upset. She's emotional. You know how she gets." "She seems perfectly rational to me," Franklin said. "You, however, seem hysterical." I looked at my mother. The word hysterical hit her like a slap. "I want to know who spent it," I said. Standing up. My legs felt steady now. The exhaustion of the last 5 years was gone, replaced by adrenaline. "I want to know who ate my rent." My father stood up too, trying to loom over me. "You sit down. Harper, you are ruining this dinner. You are ungrateful. After everything we've done. Everything you've done." I laughed. It was a cold, sharp sound. "You mean everything you've taken?" I turned to Franklin. "Show me," I said. "Please, I need to see where it went." Franklin reached into his inner jacket pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. He didn't hand it to my father. He handed it to me. "I didn't bring the full audit," he said. "Just the summary I asked my assistant to prepare when I noticed the address on the account hadn't changed in 5 years despite you moving." I unfolded the paper. It wasn't a bank statement. It was a list of withdrawals. My eyes scanned the lines. November 2021, Wauge 500. Withdrawal. November 2021, payment to BMW Financial Services. December 2021, $1,500. Withdrawal. December 2021, payment to Nordstrom. January 2022, $1,500. Withdrawal. January 2022, payment to Sandals Resorts International. I looked up at my parents. "Sandals," I asked. "You went to Jamaica the week I was in the hospital for my thyroid storm, the week I had to beg the hospital billing department for a payment plan." Elaine covered her mouth. "We needed a break," Graham yelled. "The stress of dealing with you with your rebellion, it was taking a toll on your mother." "My rebellion?" I asked. "My rebellion was trying to stay alive." I looked at the paper again. The evidence was right there. They hadn't just stolen the money. They had used it to treat themselves for the stress of having a daughter they had kicked out. I looked at Franklin. He was waiting. "You're right," I said to my grandfather. "I haven't been receiving the rent." I dropped the paper onto the Thanksgiving turkey. The grease stained the white sheet immediately. "But I think I'm ready to collect now." The paper stained with grease lay on the turkey like a verdict. But my mother did not stop. She did not freeze in shame. Instead, she dissolved. It was a transformation I had seen 1,000 times before, a weaponized fragility that she deployed whenever cornered. Elaine Mercer did not fight with logic. She fought by making you feel like a monster for accusing her. "Daddy, you are misunderstanding everything," she sobbed, pressing a linen napkin to her eyes. "You are looking at numbers on a page, but you are not looking at the heart of this family. We love Harper. We only ever wanted to protect her." "Protect me?" I asked, my voice trembling not with sadness, but with the vibration of adrenaline. "You protected me by letting me live in a studio with black mold while you went to Jamaica. We were holding it in trust." My father, Graham, interjected. He leaned forward, clasping his hands on the table, adopting the reasonable, patronizing tone he used when denying insurance claims at his job. "Harper, listen to yourself. You are agitated. You are raising your voice. This is exactly what we were afraid of." He turned to Franklin, his face a mask of concern. "Frank, you have to understand. Harper has always been delicate. Since the diagnosis, she has had cognitive fog. She makes impulsive decisions. She forgets things. If we had given her $1,500 a month, she would have wasted it on holistic quackery or lost it. We were building a safety net, a nest egg. We were managing it because she is not capable. It was a masterclass in gaslighting. In 3 sentences, he had taken my reality, my struggle, my budgeting, my survival, and twisted it into a symptom of mental instability. He was using my autoimmune disorder, the very thing that made my life so hard, as the justification for robbing me. I felt a flash of heat behind my eyes. I am a senior compliance analyst at Bright Harbor, I said, enunciating every syllable. I audit multi-million-dollar mergers. I find financial discrepancies for a living. Do not sit there and tell me I cannot manage $1,500. See, Kendall chimed in. She rolled her eyes, throwing her hands up. This is what she does. She gets so aggressive. God, Harper, why do you have to make everything so heavy? It is Thanksgiving. We are supposed to be grateful, and you are acting like we are criminals because Dad helped manage your finances. Managing finances usually involves the beneficiary knowing about the funds, Franklin said. His voice cut through the overlapping shouting like a razor wire. He was not looking at the crying Elaine or the pontificating Graham. He was looking at the untouched turkey. Graham says you are unstable, Franklin continued, his tone conversational, almost bored. Elaine says you are protected. You say you were destitute. These are 3 different stories. I am a simple man. I prefer documentation over stories. The documentation is the house, Graham insisted, sweeping his arm around the room. The equity. We improve the asset Harper stands to inherit this. It is all for her eventually. I do not want your equity, I snapped. I wanted to not choose between groceries and heating oil in February. You are exaggerating, Kendall scoffed. You always play the martyr. You lived in a cute little apartment. You were fine. I slept in my car, I said. The room went quiet again. Kendall blinked. Graham stiffened. I slept in my car, I repeated, turning to face my sister. 3 years ago, November, my heater broke, and I didn't have the cash to fix it or stay in a motel. I parked in the Walmart lot because it had lights and cameras, and I slept in the back seat under 3 blankets. That was the same month, according to Grandpa's list, that Mom bought a new dining set. That never happened, Graham said quickly. You are making that up. You have a vivid imagination. Harper. I went to Marissa's house the next night, I said, locking eyes with my father. I knocked on her door at 3 a.m. because I was so cold I couldn't stop shaking. Her mom made me soup and let me sleep on their couch for a week. You can call her right now. She remembers. She remembers because she asked me why I didn't call my parents, and I told her you said you didn't have the liquidity. My father opened his mouth, but no sound came out. The specificity of the memory, the inclusion of a witness he knew I could produce, choked him. We didn't know, Elaine stammered, pivoting to a new defense. If you had told us it was that bad, I asked you for $500, I reminded her. Dad told me it would build character. It did, Graham barked, his face turning a blotchy purple. Look at you. You are successful. You are independent. You didn't become a leech. If we had handed you money on a silver platter, you would be soft. We did you a favor. So you stole $90,000 to teach me a lesson. I asked. It wasn't stealing, Kendall shouted. It was keeping it in the family. God, you are so selfish. If you had that money, you would have just blown it on paying off those stupid student loans faster or something boring. And we needed the help. We are a family. Families share. The air in the room seemed to crystallize. It was a slip, a tiny, fatal slip. Kendall had just admitted 2 things. First, that paying off debt a responsible act was boring and wasting it, revealing her warped view of finance. But second, and far more damning, she had used the past tense. If you had that money, she knew there was money to be had. She knew there was a pot of gold that I was being denied access to. Franklin turned his head slowly toward Kendall. He looked like a predator noticing a limping gazelle. "Kendall," Franklin said softly. "You knew?" Kendall froze. She realized too late that she had spoken too much. "I mean, I assumed Dad said Grandpa helped out." "You said, if she had that money," Franklin repeated, "which implies you knew there was a specific sum being diverted. Did you know I was sending rent?" "I don't know the details," Kendall cried, her voice pitching up into a whine. "I just knew Mom and Dad were handling things. Why are you grilling me? I didn't sign anything." "No," Franklin agreed. "You just enjoyed the trips, and the car, and the tuition for the esthetician course you dropped out of." He looked at Graham. My father was sweating profusely now. The confident head of the household was melting under the glare of the man who actually owned the capital. Graham's eyes darted around the room, looking for an exit, looking for a lie that would stick. "Frank, it's complicated," Graham said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "The tax implications, the gift tax limits, I was trying to structure it so Harper didn't get hit with a bill from the IRS. I have the paperwork in my office. Somewhere. It's a mess right now. But I can show you eventually." "Eventually is a very convenient time frame," Franklin said. "It's Thanksgiving," Elaine tried again, reaching for Franklin's hand. He pulled it away before she could make contact. "Daddy, please, let's eat. The turkey is getting cold. We can sort out these administrative errors on Monday." "Administrative errors," I repeated. "Is that what we are calling grand larceny now?" "Harper, stop it," Graham shouted, slamming his hand down again. "You are trying to destroy this family over a misunderstanding. You are being vindictive. You are sick, and you are lashing out. He was trying to make me small. He was trying to put me back in the box of the sick, helpless daughter who needed her daddy to think for her. But the box didn't fit anymore. I had outgrown it the moment I realized my poverty was their paycheck. I am not sick," I said, standing my ground. "I am the only person at this table who knows exactly what is going on." Franklin picked up his coffee cup. It was fine china, part of a set that probably cost $2,000. He held it for a moment, the steam rising in the tense silence. He took a sip. He set it back down on the saucer with a sharp, deliberate clink. The sound was like a gavel striking a block. "Graham," Franklin said, "you say you have the paperwork in your office." "Yes," Graham exhaled, thinking he saw an out. "Yes, it's all filed, but it's buried. I need time to organize it. I can't just—" "And you say—" Franklin turned to Elaine. "That the money is in a trust, a nest egg safe and sound." "Yes, Daddy." Elaine nodded vigorously, her tears drying up instantly at the prospect of a reprieve. "Every penny, safe." Franklin looked at me. "And you say they spent it on vacations and renovations." "Look at the kitchen," I said. "Look at the car." Franklin nodded. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. He did not unlock it. He just held it. "I do not like mysteries," Franklin said, "and I do not like being told 3 different versions of the truth. If the money is in a trust, Graham, then you can log into the bank account right now and show me the balance. If it is invested in the house, you can show me the contractor invoices and the equity appraisal, and if it is administrative errors, we will see that too." "Now," Graham squeaked. "Frank, we are eating." "I have lost my appetite," Franklin said. He stood up. He was not a tall man, but in that moment, he towered over my father. "We are not waiting for Monday. We are not waiting for you to organize your files. We are going to your office. We are going to log into your accounts, and we are going to see exactly where my $90,000 went." "I can't," Graham said, panic rising in his throat. "I don't have the passwords memorized. They are on a secure drive." "Then we will reset them," Franklin said. "I own the bank, Graham, or at least, I own a significant enough share of the holding company that operates it. I can make a call and have the regional manager walk us through it." My mother let out a small, strangled noise. "Let's go," Franklin said, gesturing toward the hallway. "Show me the nest egg." I watched my parents, The mask of the happy, successful suburban couple finally fell away completely. What was left was pure, unadulterated terror. They weren't looking at a misunderstanding. They were looking at exposure. "I'll come too," I said. "I want to see how much I have saved." Graham looked at me with pure hatred. It was the look of a man who realized his victim had just handed him a shovel and told him to start digging. "Fine," Graham spat. "But when you see that we handled it properly, I want an apology. I want you to apologize to your mother for ruining her holiday." "If the money is there," I said, "I will apologize." But as we walked toward the study, passing the 80-inch television and the designer furniture, I knew I would never have to say that word. The money wasn't there. The money was on the walls, in the driveway, and on my sister's wrist. And for the first time in my life, the truth wasn't something I had to endure. It was something I was about to weaponize. The home office of Graham Mercer was designed to look like the command center of an important man. It had floor-to-ceiling bookshelves filled with leather-bound volumes that had never been cracked open, a humidor that was purely decorative, and a mahogany desk large enough to land a small aircraft on. But as we stood there, the room felt less like a sanctuary of power and more like an interrogation cell. Franklin did not sit in the guest chair. He sat behind my father's desk. He claimed the space with the natural authority of a man who owned the building, the land, and arguably the town. My father stood near the door, shifting his weight from foot to foot, looking like a truant schoolboy waiting for the principal. My mother and Kendall huddled on the leather sofa, clutching each other as if they were bracing for a hurricane. I stood by the window, my arms crossed over my chest. My heart was hammering against my ribs, a frantic rhythm that echoed in my ears, but my face remained still. I knew this feeling. It was the same cold, hyper-aware sensation I felt right before I finalized a compliance report that I knew would get someone fired. It was the feeling of the inevitable. Franklin placed his phone on the desk, put it on speaker, and dialed. "Redwood Federal Trust," he said to the room, though his eyes were fixed on the black screen of the phone. "Private client services." My father took a step forward, his hands raised in a pathetic gesture of protest. "Frank, this is insane. It is Thanksgiving. The banks are closed. You are going to get some poor call center rep who doesn't know anything. We can pull the files ourselves on Monday when the market opens." "I do not call centers, Graham," Franklin said, his voice flat. The line rang twice before a crisp, professional voice answered. "Mr. Hart, happy Thanksgiving. To what do we owe the pleasure?" "Hello, David," Franklin said. "I apologize for the intrusion on the holiday. I require an immediate transaction history for the outgoing recurring transfer labeled Harper Rent Support from my personal holdings account. I need the full 5-year history, specifically the destination routing and account numbers for every deposit. Generate it as a PDF and email it to me. Now." "Of course, sir," the voice on the phone said without a second of hesitation. "Give me 90 seconds. Frank, please," Graham pleaded, his voice cracking. Sweat was beading on his upper lip, glistening under the expensive track lighting. "You are making a scene over nothing. We move the money around to maximize interest. It is standard portfolio management. If the account numbers don't match exactly, it is because we were using high-yield savings vehicles." "High-yield savings vehicles," Franklin repeated, looking at Graham with an expression of profound boredom. "Is that what we are calling it?" "It is a holiday," Graham shouted, his composure fracturing completely. "You cannot do a forensic audit on Thanksgiving. It is immoral." "Holidays do not erase ledgers, Graham," Franklin said. "And the only immorality I see is a man sweating through his shirt because he knows the math is not going to add up." The room fell into a suffocating silence. The only sound was the faint ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner and the heavy, ragged breathing of my mother. I looked at her. She wasn't looking at me. She was staring at the carpet, her fingers twisting a loose thread on the sofa cushion, unraveling it just as her life was unraveling. I felt a strange detachment. For 5 years, I had wondered if I was crazy. I had wondered if I was just bad with money, if I was ungrateful. If I was the problem, I had let them define my reality. But as I watched them squirm, the fog lifted. I wasn't the problem. I was the victim of a long con. Ping. The sound of the email notification on Franklin's iPad was soft. But in that quiet room, it sounded like a gunshot. Graham flinched. Kendall let out a small, sharp gasp. Franklin did not rush. He reached into his breast pocket and withdrew his reading glasses. He unfolded them slowly, deliberately, and placed them on the bridge of his nose. He looked like a judge preparing to read a death sentence. He tapped the screen, opening the file. The glow of the iPad illuminated his face, casting deep shadows under his eyes. He scrolled. He scrolled again. The silence stretched out, taut and agonizing. 60 transfers, Franklin said. His voice was devoid of anger, which made it terrifying. It was the voice of pure data. Starting 5 years ago, November 1st. $1,500, he looked up at Graham. Destination account ending in 442. Franklin read. My stomach dropped. I knew that number. I had seen it on checks my mother had written for school fundraisers years ago. I had seen it on the rare occasions she sent me $20 for a birthday card. That is not a trust, I said. My voice was quiet, but it cut through the room. That is Mom's personal checking account. Elaine let out a sob. I was going to transfer it. I got busy, and then we had expenses. We were going to pay it back. Harper, I swear. Franklin ignored her. He looked back at the screen. December 1st, $1,500, destination personal checking. January 1st, $1,500, destination personal checking. He scrolled faster now, his eyes scanning the columns of betrayal. February, March, April, May. He stopped scrolling and looked at my father. $90,000, Franklin said. He said the number slowly, letting the weight of it settle on the mahogany desk. $90,000 intended to keep a roof over my granddaughter's head, and it never left your personal spending pool. We had emergencies, Graham yelled, cornered and vicious. The roof leaked. The car transmission blew. What were we supposed to do? Let the house rot. It was a loan. We treated it as an internal family loan. A loan requires the consent of the lender, Franklin said. This is embezzlement. It is not embezzlement, Kendall shrieked from the couch. She stood up, her face flushed. You are ruining everything. Why does it matter where the money went as long as we are all okay? Harper is fine. Look at her. She has a job. She is alive. Why are you punishing us for money you didn't even miss? Franklin turned his gaze to Kendall. He looked at her for a long time, studying her face as if he were trying to solve a difficult puzzle. Then, he looked back down at the iPad. You bring up an interesting point, Kendall, he said, about where the money went. He tapped the screen, zooming in on a specific section of the document. He wasn't looking at the incoming transfers anymore. He was looking at the cross-referenced outgoing data that the bank had helpfully included, linking the deposits to immediate withdrawals. October, 2 years ago, Franklin read. Deposit from Franklin Hart, $1,500. 3 days later, transfer from Elaine Mercer to Kendall Mercer, $2,000. The room went dead silent. Kendall stopped breathing. Memo line, Franklin read, his voice dropping to a whisper. Graduation trip. I felt the blood drain from my face. 2 years ago, that was the year I had a dental infection I couldn't afford to treat. I had spent 3 weeks in agony, taking expired antibiotics I found in my medicine cabinet because I didn't have the cash for a root canal. You went to Cabo, I said, looking at my sister. I remember the Instagram photos. You said you saved up from your dog walking business. Kendall's mouth opened and closed like a fish on a dock. She looked at our mother, desperate for a lifeline, but Elaine had buried her face in her hands. And here, Franklin continued, relentless. August of last year, deposit $1,500, transfer to Kendall Mercer $1,200, memo new MacBook. I needed it for school, Kendall cried, tears streaming down her face now. My old one was slow. Harper was working on a refurbished laptop with a cracked screen. Franklin said, I noticed it when she visited me last Christmas. She didn't ask for a new one. She just taped the corner. He put the iPad down. The evidence was irrefutable. It wasn't just that my parents had stolen from me. It was that they had taken the money meant for my survival and funneled it to the sister who had never worked a hard day in her life. They had cannibalized my stability to feed her luxury. Franklin took off his glasses and folded them. The snap of the hinges closing signaled the end of the trial. This is not mismanagement, Franklin said. This is predation. Daddy, please, Elaine wailed. We can fix this. We can write a payment plan. Just don't look at me like that. I am looking at a thief, Franklin said, and I'm looking at her accomplices. He stood up. He smoothed the front of his cashmere sweater. He did not look angry. He looked resolved. He looked like a man who had just cut a godotting limb off a tree to save the trunk. We are leaving, Franklin said. Leaving? Graham stammered. Where dessert is, we haven't had pie. There will be no pie, Franklin said. I am taking Harper. She will not be staying in this house tonight, and she will certainly not be driving back to her apartment alone. He walked around the desk. He didn't stop to look at my father. He walked straight to me. Get your coat. Harper, he said. I looked at my parents. My father was pale, defeated, leaning against the doorframe as if it were the only thing holding him upright. My mother was a crumpled mess on the sofa. Kendall was staring at the floor, her face burning with the shame of being exposed not as a golden child, but as a parasite. I didn't say goodbye. I didn't shout. I didn't demand an apology. I just nodded. Yes, sir, I said. I walked out of the office, past the high-end art, past the kitchen with the quartz countertops that my hunger had paid for. I grabbed my coat from the rack. Franklin opened the front door. The cold November air hit my face, sharp and clean. It felt like oxygen. It felt like freedom. As I stepped onto the porch, I realized something shifted in the universe. When I walked into this house 3 hours ago, I was the disappointing daughter, the one who couldn't make it, the one who needed to be managed. Now, as I walked down the steps toward Franklin's waiting town car, leaving the house of lies behind me, I was something else entirely. I was no longer the defendant. I was the star witness, and the trial had only just begun. The ride to Franklin's estate was a blur of passing streetlights and silence. I sat in the back of the town car, watching my reflection in the dark window. I looked the same as I had when I woke up that morning, same hair, same coat, but the person inside the clothes felt entirely different. I felt lighter, yet anchored by a heavy, cold realization. Franklin's house was in the next county, a sprawling stone manor that sat on a hill overlooking the Sound. It was the kind of place that usually made me feel small. But tonight, walking through the heavy oak double doors, it felt like a fortress. It was quiet. Not the tense, performative quiet of my parents' dining room, but the deep, settled silence of a place that had nothing to prove. We went straight to his library. A fire was already crackling in the hearth, likely tended to by staff I hadn't seen. Franklin gestured for me to sit in one of the wingback chairs near the fire. He walked to a crystal decanter on a side table. Brandy, he said. It wasn't a question. He poured 2 glasses. He handed one to me and sat in the chair opposite. He looked tired. The steel resolve he had shown at my parents' house had softened into a weary disappointment. He took a long sip of the amber liquid and stared into the fire. I owe you an apology. Harper, he said. His voice was low, rasping slightly. You didn't take the money, I said. The brandy burned my throat, a welcome distraction from the numbness in my chest. No, Franklin agreed. I did not take it, but I facilitated it. I prided myself on being a good judge of character. I built a billion-dollar logistics empire by knowing who to trust. And yet, for 60 months, I let my own daughter and son-in-law play me for a fool. He turned his gaze to me. I assumed you were struggling because you were young. I assumed you were silent because you were ashamed. It never occurred to me that you were silent because you didn't know the conversation existed. I looked down at the glass in my hands. I wasn't ashamed, I said. I was just trying to survive. I didn't want to give them the satisfaction of seeing me fail. And you didn't, Franklin said. That is what strikes me. You survived without the $90,000. How? I took a breath. This was the moment. For years, my parents had painted me as the chaotic, artsy dropout who couldn't handle the real world. I needed Franklin to know the truth. I didn't just survive, I said, my voice gaining strength. I built a career. I told you I work at Bright Harbor, but I don't think you know what I actually do. Franklin raised an eyebrow. Tell me. I am the lead compliance officer for the Mid-Atlantic region, I said. Last month, I uncovered a structuring scheme in a merger between two pharmaceutical supply chains. The project I am leading right now involves auditing regulatory adherence for a company valued at $400 million. I manage a team of 6 analysts. I bought my own car, I pay my own rent, and I have perfect credit. Franklin stared at me. A slow realization washed over his face. He wasn't looking at the delicate granddaughter Graham had described. He was looking at a professional. They told me you were working part-time, Franklin said softly. They said you were hopping between temp jobs. They said you needed the money for stability. They lied, I said. They needed me to be a failure, because if I was successful, I wouldn't need the rent support, and if I didn't need the rent support, they couldn't buy a new kitchen. Franklin set his glass down. The clink against the coaster was sharp. This is not a family dispute, he said. The weariness was gone, replaced by a cold, hard edge. If a warehouse manager diverted $90,000 of inventory to his personal account, I would not call his mother to discuss it. I would call the authorities. They are your daughter and son-in-law, I said. It wasn't a defense. It was just a fact. That makes it worse, Franklin countered. Strangers steal because they are greedy. Family steals because they think they are entitled. They looked me in the eye for 5 years. They accepted my gratitude for taking care of Harper while they were booking flights to Cabo. He reached for a leather folder on the table next to him. He opened it and pulled out a business card. He slid it across the small table toward me. Dana Kessler, attorney at law. I know her, I said, recognizing the name immediately. She handled the whistleblower case against that tech firm in Seattle last year. She is aggressive. She is effective, Franklin corrected. She specializes in fraud, conversion, and breach of fiduciary duty. I have already drafted an email to her. I want you to meet with her on Monday morning. My heart skipped a beat. This was real. We weren't just going to yell at them and cut them off. We were going to war. You want me to sue my parents, I stated. I want you to reclaim what is yours. Franklin said, technically, the money was a gift from me to you, intercepted by them. That constitutes conversion. It is civil theft. But there is also the matter of the tax implications they mentioned. If they claimed that money as anything other than income, they are in trouble with the IRS. Dana will find out. I looked at the fire. I thought about my mother crying in the kitchen. I thought about my father's purple face as he screamed at me. I thought about Kendall's new laptop. Then I thought about the night I slept in the Walmart parking lot. I thought about the cold seeping into my bones. I thought about the fear. I will do it, I said. I looked up at Franklin. But I have a condition, Franklin nodded. Name it. No dirty tricks, I said. No smear campaigns, no leaking things to their neighbors, or trying to get Dad fired from his job through back channels. I don't want to destroy them just to see them burn. I want the record corrected. I want the money returned. And I want it done with absolute, undeniable proof. Everything has to be by the book. I leaned forward. I work in compliance. Grandfather, I don't break rules. I enforce them. A smile touched Franklin's lips. It was a genuine smile this time, full of pride. Agreed, he said. We will stick to the facts. The facts are damning enough. He picked up the poker and adjusted a log in the fire. Sparks flew up the chimney. There is one more thing you should know, Franklin said, watching the sparks die out. I did not just decide to visit for Thanksgiving on a whim, I frowned. What do you mean? Last month, Franklin began, settling back into his chair. I was at a charity gala in the city. I ran into your cousin Sheila. You know Sheila? The one who never stops talking. I know her. I said. She was gushing about your mother, Franklin said. She told me she had just been to a wonderful party at Elaine's house to christen the new kitchen. She went on and on about the Marble Island. She said Elaine told everyone that business was booming for Graham. Franklin's eyes narrowed. I know Graham's business, Franklin said. I know the insurance market has been flat for 2 quarters, and I know that a kitchen renovation of that magnitude costs at least $50,000. It did not add up, so I started looking at the dates. You set a trap, I whispered. I verified my suspicions, Franklin corrected. I stopped the automatic transfer for this month, just to see what would happen. 2 days ago, your mother called me. She was sweet, asking about my health, but eventually, she asked if there was a banking glitch. She said the support for Harper hadn't arrived. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. She called you, I asked. 2 days ago. Yes, Franklin said. She told me you were having a crisis. She said you needed to pay a medical bill and were panicking. She begged me to expedite the check. I closed my eyes. 2 days ago. I was at work, eating a salad at my desk. Perfectly fine. My mother had used a fake medical emergency, my actual medical history, to try and squeeze one last payment out of him before the holiday. That is why I came today, Franklin said. I wanted to see if they would say it to my face, and I wanted to see you. I needed to know if you were really the invalid they described, or if you were the victim I feared you were. He stood up and walked over to me. He placed a hand on my shoulder. His grip was firm. I am sorry I was late, he said, but I am here now, and we are going to fix this. They are going to hate us, I said quietly. Kendall, Mom, Dad, they will never forgive this. They have not earned the right to forgive anyone, Franklin said. They forfeited that right when they let you freeze while they booked a tropical vacation. He walked to the door of the library. Go upstairs. The guest suite in the East Wing is prepared. Sleep, for the first time in 5 years. You do not have to worry about rent. You do not have to worry about the heat, and you do not have to worry about being alone. I stood up. My legs felt heavy, but steady. Thank you, I said. Do not thank me yet, Franklin replied, his hand on the doorknob. Save it for when the judge bangs the gavel. Grandfather, I asked. He turned back. Why Dana Kessler? I asked. You have lawyers on retainer who cost 3 times as much. Because Dana doesn't just win, Franklin said, a dark glint in his eye. She dissects, and like you said, we don't need to scream at them. We don't need drama. We just need the truth. But we need the truth signed, notarized, and filed with the court. He opened the door. Get some rest. Harper, tomorrow, we stop being family. Tomorrow, we start being plaintiffs. I walked past him, out of the library and toward the stairs. I didn't look back. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't thinking about how to survive the next month. I was thinking about how to balance the ledger. And for a compliance officer, there is no greater satisfaction than a balanced ledger. Monday morning arrived with the sterile precision of a scalpel. I was sitting in a conference room on the 42nd floor of a skyscraper in downtown Hartford. The view was expensive, overlooking the river and the gray urban sprawl, but the woman sitting across from me was the most intimidating thing in the room. Dana Kessler did not look like the kind of lawyer who chased ambulances. She looked like the kind of lawyer who chased executives. She wore a suit that was tailored to within a millimeter of its life, and her hair was cut in a sharp, asymmetrical bob that suggested she did not have time for nonsense. Next to her sat a man named Marcus, a forensic accountant from a firm called Harbor Point Forensics. He was quiet, bespectacled, and had the demeanor of a man who found joy in spreadsheets. We have preliminary access, Dana said, sliding a thick binder across the glass table toward Franklin and me. Your grandfather's power of attorney over the original transfer account, combined with the discovery motion we filed at 9 a.m. this morning regarding the joint account your father claimed was a trust, gave us a window. It is a very dirty window, but we can see through it. I opened the binder. It wasn't just numbers. It was a timeline of my life, juxtaposed against a timeline of their greed. Marcus cleared his throat. He tapped a key on his laptop, and a chart appeared on the wall monitor. It was a simple flow of funds analysis, color-coded for clarity, green for money in, red for money out. The pattern is mechanical, Marcus said. His voice was dry, devoid of judgment, which somehow made the facts hit harder. On the first of the month, inevitably, $1,500 arrives from Mr. Hart. The funds sit in the account for an average of 48 to 72 hours. He clicked to the next slide. Then, we see the exodus, Marcus continued. In 80% of the months reviewed, a payment of roughly $400 to $600 is made to a Chase Sapphire Reserve card. Another $400 goes to BMW Financial Services. The remainder is usually withdrawn as cash or transferred to a secondary account labeled household check. I stared at the screen. The BMW, I said. That's Dad's car, the X5. Correct, Dana said. We pulled the lien information. The payments match exactly. Essentially, your rent money was driving him to work every day. I felt a cold knot tighten in my stomach. I looked at the dates on the spreadsheet in front of me. September 3rd. Transfer out $600. Vendor Pottery Barn. That was the month I had to beg my landlord for an extension because my hours at the diner had been cut. I had eaten peanut butter on stale bread for a week. While I was choking down dry toast, my mother was buying throw pillows. It gets more specific, Marcus said. We cross-referenced the larger lump sum withdrawals with social media activity and credit card statements we subpoenaed. He pointed to a cluster of transactions from 2 years ago. June, Marcus read, $1,500 in, 3 days later, a payment of $1,200 to an airline carrier. 2 days after that, charges appear in Napa Valley for wine tastings and a hotel called the Vintage Estate. I remembered that week. I had the flu. I was so sick I couldn't get out of bed to fill my water glass. I had called my mother, crying, asking if she could bring me some soup or just check on me. She told me they were away at a conference for Dad's work and couldn't talk. It wasn't a conference, I whispered. They were drinking wine on my rent. The correlation is 100%, Dana said. There is not a single month where the money remained in the account for more than 5 days. There is no savings. There is no investment. The account balance as of this morning is $42.16. I opened my bag and pulled out my own folder. It was meager compared to their binder. It held my lease agreements from the last 5 years, my pay stubs from Bright Harbor, and the wadded-up carbon copies of shift slips from the Night Owl Diner. Here is my side of the story, I said, sliding the papers to Dana. This is proof that I paid my own rent, every single month, check number 104 through check number 160. You can see the payee is my landlord, Mr. Henderson. Dana took the papers. She scanned them with a predator's eye. Excellent. This establishes damages. You paid out of pocket for expenses that were contractually covered by a third party, your grandfather. This proves you suffered financial harm while they enriched themselves. Franklin had been silent until now. Standing by the window, watching the city, he turned around. His face was gray. They didn't just spend it, Franklin said. They counted on it. They built their life around the expectation of my granddaughter's suffering. It is a dependency model, Marcus agreed. They treated the stipend as fixed income. If you had suddenly told them you didn't need it, they would have defaulted on their car loan within 60 days. That was the realization that made me nauseous. I wasn't just a burden to them. I was a necessary asset. My silence was the collateral for their lifestyle. My phone buzzed on the table. Then it buzzed again. And again, a rapid-fire staccato of vibration that rattled the glass surface. I looked down. Mother Harper. Pick up the phone. This has gone too far. Mother, we are family. You don't involve lawyers with family. Father, you are ungrateful. After everything we sacrificed, I'm going to call your boss. I know people at Bright Harbor. Mother Daddy is confused. You are manipulating an old man. Stop this madness. I stared at the messages. The gaslighting was no longer working, but the volume was increasing. They were panicked. They were throwing everything at the wall to see what would stick: guilt, threats, shame. Don't answer them, Dana advised, not even looking up from the documents. In fact, block them for now. Any communication goes through me. I reached for the phone to silence it, but another message popped up. This one wasn't from my parents. It was from Kendall, and it was different. Kendall Harper, please, I need to see you. Just you, not Grandpa, not the lawyers. Kendall. They are talking about mortgaging the house to pay him back, but Dad can't qualify. Kendall, I'm scared. I think they put something in my name, too. Please meet me. I froze. Kendall wants to meet, I said. She says she thinks they used her name. Dana looked up sharply. Do not meet her alone. She is a hostile witness. She could be wearing a wire, or she could be trying to lure you into a confrontation that they can record and edit to make you look unstable. She sounds scared, I said. She doesn't sound like the girl who was mocking me at Thanksgiving. Fear makes people unpredictable, Franklin warned. But if they used her name, that suggests a pattern. Speaking of names, Marcus interrupted. He hesitated, looking from Dana to me. During the initial credit sweep, which we ran to establish a baseline for your financial independence, we found something disturbing. My heart hammered against my ribs. What? Marcus turned the laptop around so I could see the screen. It was a credit report. My credit report. Do you bank with Colonial Savings? Marcus asked. No, I said. I have used a national bank since college. 3 years ago, Marcus said, pointing to a line item. There was a hard inquiry on your credit report from Colonial Savings. It was for a personal line of credit, $5,000. I never applied for that, I said. My voice sounded thin. The application was denied, Marcus said. Likely because your debt-to-income ratio at the time was too high due to your student loans, but the inquiry is there. And the address listed on the application. He zoomed in. 14 Oakwood Drive, my parents' house. They tried to take out a loan in my name, I realized. They were already taking $1,500 a month, and it wasn't enough, so they tried to borrow $5,000 using my Social Security number. Identity theft, Dana said. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. This is no longer just a civil dispute about a gift. This is federal fraud. They attempted to obtain credit using your credentials without your consent. I felt the room spin. It wasn't just greed. It was a complete disregard for my existence as a human being. I was just a resource to them, a name to be signed, a credit score to be harvested. If the loan had been approved, I said, I would have been on the hook for it. They would have spent it, defaulted, and ruined my credit. I would never have gotten my job at Bright Harbor with a defaulted loan on my record. Compliance officers have to pass financial background checks. They would have cost you your career, Franklin said. His voice was trembling with a rage I had never seen before. To buy what? A new sofa. A weekend trip. We need to lock it down, Dana said, snapping the binder shut. I am authorizing a total freeze on your credit bureaus immediately. We are filing an affidavit of identity theft with the Federal Trade Commission this afternoon. That gives us the leverage to subpoena the original application from Colonial Savings. If your father's handwriting is on that signature line, he is looking at prison time. Franklin stood up. He walked over to the table and placed his hand on top of mine. Do it, Franklin said to Dana. Prepare the civil suit for the $90,000, but prepare the criminal referral packet as well. We will hold it in reserve, but I want it ready. He looked at me. Are you all right? I looked at the phone, where Kendall's desperate text was still glowing on the screen. I looked at the spreadsheet showing my life traded for luxury goods. I looked at the credit report that showed they were willing to burn my future to keep themselves warm. I am not all right, I said, but I am done being a victim. I picked up my phone. I didn't block them. Instead, I took a screenshot of Kendall's text and forwarded it to Dana's email address. I won't meet her alone, I said, but we need to know what she knows. If they used her name too, she isn't just a hostile witness. She is a co-victim who hasn't realized it yet. Dana nodded. I will arrange a deposition. We will get her on the record, under oath. I looked out the window at the gray city. I used to think my family was just dysfunctional. I used to think they were just bad with money and a little selfish. I was wrong. They were a machine, a consumption machine that had been feeding on me for 5 years. And for the first time, I wasn't just looking at the damage. I was looking at the blueprints of how they broke me. Send the letters, I told Dana. Send them all. Franklin nodded to Marcus. Bill me for everything. I want every single transaction traced. If they bought a pack of gum with Harper's money, I want to know what flavor it was. As the team went back to work, the hum of efficiency filling the room, I realized that the Thanksgiving dinner hadn't been the explosion. It was just the fuse. The explosion was coming, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't the one who was going to get burned. I was the one holding the match. The fallout did not look like a legal battle at first. It looked like a siege. For the first 48 hours after Dana sent the initial preservation notice, a legal document demanding that my parents not destroy any financial records, my phone did not stop vibrating. It wasn't a communication device anymore. It was a grenade that kept going off in my pocket. My mother, Elaine, was the first wave. She didn't text. She called, over and over, leaving voicemails that oscillated between hyperventilating panic and guilt-tripping martyrdom. Harper, please, pick up. Her voice cracked in the first message. Your father is losing his mind. He's talking about heart palpitations. Do you want to kill him over money? We are your family. We changed your diapers. We held you when you had chickenpox. You can't let a lawyer destroy us because of a misunderstanding. I listened to it in the quiet of Franklin's guest room, my hand hovering over the delete button before remembering Dana's instruction document everything. By the third call, the tone had shifted. I spoke to your grandfather. Elaine wept, her voice thick with what sounded like whine. He is confused. Harper, he is old. You are whispering poison in his ear. You need to call him and tell him to withdraw this attack. Tell him we were just borrowing it. Tell him we are family. The word family was being used like a riot shield. She was holding it up to deflect the bullets of her own actions, expecting it to absorb the impact of $90,000 worth of theft. When I didn't answer, my father took over. Graham didn't cry. He raged. His texts came in blocks of capital letters, assaultive and incoherent. You are an ungrateful child. After everything we did, I paid for your braces. I paid for your piano lessons. Now you count pennies. You are disgusting. I am going to call Bright Harbor. I will tell them you are harassing us. I will tell them you are mentally unstable. Pick up the phone. I stared at the screen, feeling a phantom ache in my chest. He wasn't denying the theft. He was angry that he was being held accountable for it. He truly believed that raising me gave him a line of credit on my life that he could draw from indefinitely. But the worst part wasn't the direct fire. It was the guerrilla warfare my sister launched. Kendall didn't message me directly after her initial panic. Instead, she took to Instagram. She didn't name me. She was too smart for that, but she curated a narrative of victimization that was a work of art. She posted a black screen with white text. It's funny how money reveals people's true colors. Some people will burn down their own home just to warm their hands on the cash. Heartbroken that my circle is smaller today. Then came a photo of her and my mother, hugging, with the caption, holding on to the real ones, family over greed, always. The comments section was a firing squad. My cousins, my aunts, even old neighbors I hadn't seen in a decade were chiming in. Stay strong, hun. Toxic people need to go. Is this about H? I always knew she was trouble. Praying for you guys. Money is the root of all evil. My Aunt Patricia. My father's sister sent me a direct message on Facebook, Harper. I saw Kendall's post. I don't know what's going on. But shame on you. Your parents are good people. If you need money that badly, ask for a loan. Don't blackmail them. I sat on the edge of the bed, my fingers trembling. I wanted to scream. I wanted to post the PDF of the bank transfers. I wanted to post the picture of Kendall's graduation trip to Cabo funded by my rent. I wanted to reply to Aunt Patricia and tell her that the good people had let me sleep in a Walmart parking lot. But I didn't. Do not engage, Dana had told me. Every time you respond, you give them ammunition to claim you are emotional or vindictive. Silence is terrifying to liars. It makes them fill the void with mistakes. So I let the phone buzz. I took screenshots. I forwarded every threat, every lie, every vague social media post to Dana's encrypted server. I was not a sister anymore. I was a compliance officer compiling a dossier. That evening, the doorbell of the estate rang. I stiffened, expecting my father to be storming the gates, but the housekeeper told me I had a visitor. It was Marissa. My best friend looked out of place in the grand foyer of Franklin's mansion, clutching her beaten-up tote bag like a shield. When she saw me coming down the stairs, she didn't say hello. She just dropped the bag and ran to me, hugging me so hard I lost my breath. "I saw Kendall's story," Marissa said, pulling back to look at me. I almost commented. I had, "You're a thief and a liar" typed out, but I deleted it because I didn't want to mess up your case. "Thank you," I said, managing a weak smile. It's a lot. It's about to be more," Marissa said. Her face turned serious. "Harper, remember when you stayed on my couch that week you were sick?" "Yeah. I was going through my old cloud backups last night, looking for photos for my portfolio." Marissa said, "And I found a file, an audio file." She pulled out her phone and tapped the screen. "You were sleeping." My phone was on the coffee table, recording a voice memo because I was trying to capture a melody for a song I was writing. "Your phone rang. You didn't wake up, so it went to voicemail. But my phone, it caught the audio of the message being played out loud when you checked it the next morning." She pressed play. The recording was tinny, filled with the ambient noise of Marissa's old apartment, but my mother's voice cut through the static like a knife. "Harper, stop calling. We don't have any money to give you. Your father is stressed enough without you begging. If you can't make rent, that is your problem. Don't come back here. We can't afford you." The recording ended. The silence in the foyer was heavy. "She said they couldn't afford me," I whispered. "That was November of 5 years ago. That was the first month Grandpa sent the check." "She literally said, 'We don't have any money,' while she was sitting on $1,500 of your money," Marissa said, her eyes blazing. "This proves it wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't, 'We are saving it for her.' It was, 'We are keeping it, and she can starve.'" "Send it to me," I said. "Send it right now." That voicemail was the key. It destroyed the nest egg defense. You cannot claim you are holding money in trust for someone while simultaneously telling them you are broke and refusing to help them. It proved malice, but the universe wasn't done handing me ammunition. Later that night, while I was sitting in the library with Franklin, reviewing the draft of the official demand letter, my phone pinged with a message from a number I didn't save. It was my cousin, Sheila, the one Franklin had run into at the gala, the chatty one. "Sheila. Hey Harper, this is weird, but are you okay? Kendall is posting some crazy stuff about you stealing from the family." I hesitated, then typed back, "I can't talk about it. Sheila. Legal reasons. Sheila. Legal Jesus. Look, I don't want to get involved, but I thought it was weird. Uncle Graham was literally bragging at the 4th of July barbecue 2 years ago about how Franklin was subsidizing the family wealth. He told my dad that Franklin gave them a monthly retainer to manage the estate. He made it sound like he was being paid a salary for being a son-in-law." I showed the phone to Franklin. He adjusted his glasses, reading the text. "A retainer," Franklin said, his voice dangerously low. "He told the extended family that my granddaughter's rent was his salary. They rewrote reality," I said. "To me, they were broke. To you, they were helpful guardians. To the rest of the family, they were savvy business managers receiving a retainer. They had a different lie for every audience. And now," Franklin said, "all the audiences are in the same room." The next morning, Dana sent the demand letter. It was not a polite note. It was a 20-page document that laid out the 60 fraudulent transfers, the credit card payments to BMW and Nordstrom, the unauthorized credit inquiry, and the transcript of the voicemail Marissa had found. It demanded the immediate return of $90,000, plus interest, plus legal fees. It also stated that if the money was not returned within 7 days, we would be filing a civil suit for conversion and forwarding our findings regarding the identity theft to the district attorney. The reaction was immediate. My father didn't text this time. He emailed Dana, or rather, a lawyer he had hastily hired, a guy named Barry whose email address was a Gmail account, emailed Dana. The subject line was Settlement Proposal. Confidential. Dana read it to us over speakerphone. Mr. Mercer disputes the characterization of the funds as stolen. Dana read, her voice dripping with professional disdain. However, to preserve family harmony, he is willing to offer a settlement. He proposes to pay Ms. Rodriguez $500 a month until the principal sum of $40,000 is reached. In exchange, Ms. Rodriguez will sign a non-disclosure agreement, retract all accusations, and acknowledge that the funds were used for shared family expenses. $40,000, I asked. He stole $90. And $500 a month. Franklin scoffed. He is offering to pay you back with your own money over the next 15 years, and he wants you to lie about it. The NDA is the important part, Dana noted. They are terrified of the identity theft charge. That credit inquiry is a felony. They want you to sign a paper saying you authorized everything so they don't go to jail. They want me to sign a lie, I said. They want me to say I let them starve me. I felt a surge of fear, not the fear of being homeless, but the fear of their narrative. They were so good at this. They were so good at twisting the truth until I didn't know which way was up. If I didn't sign, they would drag this out. They would smear me in court. They would tell everyone I was a drug addict or mentally ill to explain why they managed my money. They will lie about me in court, I said to Franklin. They will say I'm crazy. They've already started planting the seeds with Kendall's posts. Franklin looked at me. He was sitting in his leather armchair, the firelight catching the sharp angles of his face. He didn't look like a billionaire in that moment. He looked like a grandfather who had failed to protect his own. Let them lie, Franklin said. Lies are expensive in court. Harper, perjury is a crime. Slander is a tort. Every lie they tell under oath is another zero on the check they will eventually write. But they are my parents, I said, the words tasting like ash. I am suing my parents. People will think I'm a monster. People think a lot of things, Franklin said. But the law does not think. The law counts. He leaned forward, his eyes locking onto mine with an intensity that made me sit up straighter. You are confused about what is happening, Franklin said. You think you are suing your mother and father. You think you are suing the people who raised you. That is why you feel guilty. I do, I admitted. I feel like I'm breaking the natural order. You are not suing a family, Franklin said. His voice was soft, but it had the weight of a mountain. You are suing an action. You are suing the act of theft. You are suing the act of deceit. You are suing the act of predation. The fact that the people who committed these acts share your DNA is a tragedy, but it is not a defense. He pointed to the stack of evidence on the table, the spreadsheets, the texts, the voicemail transcript. That is not a mother, Franklin said, pointing to the voicemail. That is a debtor. That is not a father. He pointed to the BMW payments. That is an embezzler. Treat them as such. I looked at the papers. He was right. The people in those documents weren't the parents I had yearned for. They were strangers who had worn my parents' faces while they picked my pockets. No deal, I told Dana. Reject the settlement. Reject the NDA. Tell them I want the full $90,000. I want the interest. And I want an admission of guilt. They won't give you an admission, Dana warned. They will fight to the death to avoid admitting they were wrong. Then we go to court, I said, and we let the judge do it for them. I hung up the phone. I looked at the text from Sheila, the Instagram post from Kendall. the pleading voicemail from Elaine. I felt a strange sensation in my chest. The guilt was breaking apart, dissolving under the harsh light of the facts. "I'm ready," I said to Franklin. "Good," he replied. "Because they just realized that the bank of Mom and Dad is closed, and people get very dangerous when the lights go out." The mediation took place in a windowless conference room in a building that smelled of floor wax and stale negotiation. It was neutral ground, or at least that was the theory. In reality, it felt like a cage match where the weapons were binders of bank statements instead of fists. On one side of the long oak table sat my parents and their lawyer, Barry, a man whose suit was slightly too shiny and who kept checking his watch as if he had a parking meter running. On the other side sat Dana, Marcus the forensic accountant, and me. At the head of the table sat the mediator, a retired judge named Mr. Henderson, who looked like he would rather be anywhere else in the world. My mother, Elaine, was dressed in a muted beige cardigan, clutching a tissue she hadn't used yet. She was playing the role of the grieving matriarch perfectly. My father, Graham, sat stiffly, his jaw clenched so tight I could see the muscles jumping in his cheek. "We are here to find a resolution," Mr. Henderson said, opening a file folder. "The plaintiff alleges conversion of funds totaling $90,000. The defense claims these funds were managed in a family trust. Let's start there." "It wasn't a formal trust," Barry interjected, leaning forward. "It was an informal family arrangement. My clients were acting in loco parentis. They were protecting Harper from her own volatility." Elaine nodded, dabbing at dry eyes. "Harper has always been impulsive, Your Honor. Mr. Henderson, we just wanted to make sure she had a cushion. We didn't spend the money. We absorbed it into the household operational costs, which benefits everyone." "Absorbed," Dana repeated. She didn't look up from her notes. "That is a fascinating verb choice. Let's look at the absorption rate." Dana signaled to Marcus. He placed a single sheet of paper in the center of the table. "This is a timeline of the withdrawals," Dana said. "November 4th, 3 years ago, $1,500 enters the account. November 6th, 3 years ago, $1,400 is paid to the Ritz-Carlton in Philadelphia." "We took a weekend trip," Graham snapped. "Couples need to reconnect. Are you saying we aren't allowed to have a marriage because we were helping our daughter?" "I am saying you paid for the Ritz with the money designated for Harper's rent," Dana said calmly. "Unless Harper was sleeping in the bathtub of your hotel suite, that is not a family benefit." "It is fungible," Barry argued. "Money is fungible. They spent their own money on the trip, and Harper's money replaced it in the account. It is standard cash flow management." "Then show me the savings," Dana said. She leaned back, crossing her arms. "If her money replaced your money, then your money should still be there. Show me the $90,000. Graham?" Graham went silent. He adjusted his tie. He looked at the mediator. "We had setbacks. The market, the economy." "Let's move to the witness," Mr. Henderson suggested, sensing the circular argument. "You brought the sister." Kendall was brought in from the waiting room. She looked terrified. She was wearing a simple blouse and no jewelry, a stark contrast to the designer gear she usually flaunted. She sat next to Elaine, refusing to look at me. "Kendall," Dana began, "you made a statement on social media claiming your sister was stealing from the family. Do you stand by that?" "I was emotional," Kendall said, her voice small. "I just meant she is trying to hurt Mom and Dad." "Did you know about the $1,500 a month?" Dana asked. "Not really." Kendall lied. "I knew Grandpa helped out. I didn't know the amount." "Really?" Dana pulled out a printed screenshot. "Because here's a text message from you to your mother, dated 2 years ago. It says, 'Did the Harper cash come in yet? I need to put the deposit down for Cabo.' Do you recall sending that?" Kendall turned pale. She looked at Graham. Graham stared at the table. "I might have," Kendall stammered. "I needed a break. School was hard." "You weren't in school," I said. It was the first time I had spoken. "You had dropped out 3 months prior. You were working part-time at a boutique." "You don't know my life," Kendall snapped, her mask slipping. You think you're so perfect because you have a corporate job. Mom and Dad said the money was for the family. I am family. So you admit you used the money for a vacation, Dana pressed. I didn't steal it, Kendall shouted. Mom transferred it to me. She said it was a graduation present. A graduation present for a degree you didn't get, Dana noted. Paid for by a sister who was working 2 jobs. The room fell silent. Mr. Henderson made a note on his pad. The family trust defense was crumbling. It wasn't a trust, it was a slush fund. But then came the twist I didn't see coming. Marcus, the accountant, had been typing silently on his laptop during the exchange. He suddenly stopped. He tapped Dana on the arm and slid the computer toward her. He pointed to a specific line item on the spreadsheet that had been highlighted in red. Dana looked at the screen. Her eyes widened slightly. She looked at Graham. Mr. Mercer, Dana said. Her voice had changed. It wasn't the sharp tone of a litigator anymore. It was the heavy, serious tone of a prosecutor. We need to talk about the transaction on February 12th of last year. Graham froze. He didn't just stiffen. He went rigged. What about it? On February 12th, Dana read. A transfer of $4,000 was made from the account where you received Harper's rent. But it didn't go to a credit card, and it didn't go to Kendall. She turned the laptop so the mediator could see. It went to an account labeled Mercer Adjustment Fund at a bank in the Caymans. Dana said, but upon tracing the routing number, which we were able to do because of the Interbank Cooperation Treaty regarding fraud, that account is not yours. It is a holding account associated with the firm you work for, an account used to balance shortfalls in client premiums. The air left the room. I looked at my father. He was gray, not pale gray. You weren't just spending the money on lifestyle, I realized aloud. You were covering a shortage at work. Graham stood up. His chair scraped violently against the floor. That is proprietary business information. You have no right to look at my professional accounts. We have every right when you commingle funds, Dana said. You took $4,000 of Harper's money and wired it to your employer to cover what a missing premium, a calculation error. Or were you skimming from work, Graham, and using Harper's money to plug the hole before the auditors found it? This was it. The case had just metastasized. It wasn't just a family dispute anymore. If Graham was moving money to hide losses at his firm, that was corporate embezzlement. That was prison. Barry, the cheap lawyer, looked at Graham with horror. Graham, is that true? Did you wire personal funds to the corporate account? Graham didn't answer. He slumped back into his chair, putting his head in his hands. I can explain, Graham whispered. It was a temporary loan. I had a client who I needed to float a payment. I was going to pay it back. Ponzi schemes always start with a temporary loan, Franklin had told me once. My father was running a personal Ponzi scheme, robbing his daughter to pay his employer to keep his job. We need a recess, Barry said, standing up quickly. 5 minutes? Outside. They scrambled out of the room, Graham, Elaine, and Kendall, trailing behind like frightened ducklings. When they returned 10 minutes later, the dynamic had shifted completely. The arrogance was gone. In its place was naked fear. We have a proposal, Barry said, his voice shaky. Mr. Mercer is willing to agree to the full repayment of $90,000. He will liquidate his 401k to make the first payment of $50,000 immediately, and the rest will be paid over 2 years. I looked at Dana. It was everything we asked for. But, Barry added, there is a condition, a strict non-disclosure agreement. Ms. Rodriguez cannot discuss the source of the funds, the nature of the dispute, or specifically the transaction regarding the Cayman account. If she violates this, the settlement is void, and she owes damages. He was trying to buy my silence to save his career and stay out of jail. He wants to bury the work fraud, I said to Dana. He is terrified, Dana confirmed. If his compliance department hears about this, he is finished. I looked at Graham. He was looking at me with pleading eyes. Harper, please, if this gets out, I lose my license. I lose the pension. Your mother, she has nowhere to go. For a second, the old guilt flared. He was my father. Destroying his career felt like patricide. But then I remembered the voicemail. We can't afford you. No, I said. Graham blinked. What? No NDA, I said. I won't sign it. I won't be the keeper of your secrets anymore. I did that for 5 years. I let you tell everyone I was a failure so you could look successful. I am done lying for you. Harper, you are destroying us, Elaine shrieked. She reached into her oversized purse. You leave me no choice. I didn't want to do this, but you are forcing me. She pulled out a manila envelope and slammed it on the table. This is Harper's medical file, Elaine announced, her voice hysterical. From Dr. Aris, it proves she is bipolar. It proves she has episodes of delusion. She imagines things. She imagines money that isn't there. She is an unreliable witness. Dana reached for the file before Mr. Henderson could touch it. She opened it. She scanned the first page, then the second. She started to laugh. It was a cold, dry laugh. Mrs. Mercer, Dana said, did you look at these dates? They are from her diagnosis, Elaine insisted. This letter from Dr. Aris is dated 3 years ago, Dana said. But Dr. Aris retired 5 years ago. I know this because he is my uncle. Elaine's mouth fell open. And this signature, Dana pointed to the bottom of the page. It looks remarkably like it was traced. In fact, if I hold it up to the light, I can see the pixelation from a scanner. Dana slammed the folder shut. The sound echoed like a gunshot. You just submitted forged medical records to a legal mediation proceeding, Dana said. That is not just a tactic, Elaine, that is fraud upon the court, and since you did it to discredit a witness, it is also tampering. Dana turned to the mediator. We are moving for immediate sanctions, Dana said, and we are withdrawing any willingness to settle. We will see you in court, and I will be submitting this folder to the district attorney as Exhibit A. No, Graham shouted. Elaine, you idiot. What did you do? I was trying to help, Elaine wailed. I just wanted them to stop. I stood up. I felt a strange sense of calm. The chaos was swirling around me, my father screaming at my mother, my sister crying in the corner, the lawyers shouting over each other. But I was in the eye of the storm. I looked at them, really looked at them. They weren't crying because they had hurt me. They weren't crying because they had stolen $90,000 from their own flesh and blood. They weren't crying because they had let me sleep in a car. They were crying because the game was over. You aren't sorry, I said. My voice was quiet, but it cut through the noise. Graham stopped yelling. He looked at me. You aren't sorry you did it, I said. You're just sorry you got caught. I turned to Dana. Let's go. I have nothing left to say to these people. Harper, wait, Kendall cried, grabbing my arm. What about me? I didn't sign the medical thing. Don't ruin my life, too. I looked at her hand on my arm, the arm of the sister she had mocked, the sister she had used to buy a trip to Cabo. I gently but firmly removed her hand. You spent the money, Kendall, I said. You enjoyed the ride. Now you have to pay the toll. I walked out of the conference room. I didn't look back. Behind me, the sound of my family imploding was the loudest thing I had ever heard, but as I stepped into the hallway, the only thing I felt was the cool, clean air of the truth. They had tried to paint me as the unstable one, the sick one, the broken one, but in the end, they were the ones who were broken. I was just the bill collector, and the debt was finally due. The courtroom was colder than I expected. It was a sterile, windowless box in the Superior Court building, smelling faintly of lemon floor polish and old paper. There was no gallery full of spectators, no dramatic music, just the hum of the ventilation system and the scratching of the court reporter's stenotype. I sat at the plaintiff's table next to Dana Kessler. On the other side, my parents sat with their lawyer, Barry. They looked smaller here, without the backdrop of their renovated kitchen or the armor of their social standing. They just looked like two middle-aged people terrified of a spreadsheet. Kendall sat behind them, chewing on her cuticle until it bled. Judge Alvarez entered. She was a woman in her 60s with sharp eyes and a demeanor that suggested she had zero patience for family squabbles. She sat down, adjusted her robe, and looked at the docket. "We are here for the matter of Rodriguez versus Mercer," Judge Alvarez said. "Claims of conversion, fraud, and breach of fiduciary duty. Ms. Kessler, you may proceed." Dana stood up. She didn't pace. She didn't shout. She simply walked to the podium and placed a thick binder on the stand. "Your Honor," Dana began, her voice crisp and clear, "this case is not about a family misunderstanding. It is about mathematics. And mathematics does not lie." She motioned to the large screen set up for the court. The first slide appeared. It was the same data we had analyzed in the conference room, but laid out for judicial scrutiny. "Exhibit A," Dana said. 60 individual wire transfers. From the personal account of Franklin Hart to the joint account of Graham and Elaine Mercer. One transfer on the first of every month for 5 consecutive years. Amount $1,500. Memo line, Harper rent support. Dana let the list scroll. It went on and on. 60 lines of text, 60 promises. "That is $90,000, Dana said, "sent with the specific, written intent to provide housing for the plaintiff. Harper Rodriguez." She clicked the remote. The screen changed. "Exhibit B," Dana continued. "The bank statements of the defendants for the corresponding dates." The screen split. On the left, the incoming rent support. On the right, the outgoing expenditures. "November 3rd, Dana read. "Incoming $1,500. November 5th, payment to BMW Financial Services, $800. Payment to Nordstrom, $400. Cash withdrawal, $300. She clicked again. "December 2nd, incoming $1,500. December 4th, payment to Liberty. Travel for a deposit on a vacation to Jamaica, $1,200. Objection. Barry stood up, his suit jacket bunching up at the shoulders. Relevance. The defendants used commingled funds to manage the household, which Harper was a part of effectively, as she is their daughter. Harper did not live in the household, Dana countered smoothly. She had been evicted by the defendants 5 years prior. Paying for a BMW that Harper never drove and a vacation Harper never took is not household management. It is theft. Overruled, Judge Alvarez said. Continue, Ms. Kessler. Dana spent the next hour dismantling their life. She didn't leave them a shred of dignity. She matched every single rent support check to a luxury purchase. She showed the judge the pattern. It wasn't random. It was a reflex. As soon as the money hit their account, they spent it on themselves. Then, it was my turn. I took the stand. I placed my hand on the Bible and swore to tell the truth. I looked at my parents. My mother was weeping silently, a practiced, tragic weeping. My father was staring at the table, refusing to meet my eyes. Ms. Rodriguez, Dana asked, where did you live from November of 5 years ago to present? I lived at 402 Elm Street, apartment 4B, I said. And then I moved to 1210 Oak Avenue. And who paid the rent at these locations? I did, I said. How? I worked, I said. I worked as a filing clerk during the day, and I worked the night shift at a diner called the Night Owl. Dana handed me a stack of papers. Please identify these documents. These are my pay stubs, I said, flipping through them, and copies of my canceled checks made out to my landlords. Did you ever receive $1,500 a month from your parents? Never, I said. Did they ever offer to help you with rent? No, I said. In fact, when I asked for help, they told me they didn't have the liquidity. Liquidity, Dana repeated. Interesting choice of words for people receiving $90,000 a year in subsidies. Barry stood up to cross-examine me. He looked sweaty. Ms. Rodriguez, Barry said, trying to sound authoritative. Is it not true that your parents bought you groceries, that they kept a room for you at their house, that they considered that money a safety net for your known emotional instability? I bought my own groceries, I said, keeping my voice flat. And I haven't slept in their house in 5 years. As for my emotional instability, I have held a high-level compliance job for 4 years. My instability seems to be a narrative my parents invented to justify keeping my money. Barry faltered. He didn't have anywhere to go. The numbers were against him. Next came Marissa. She took the stand wearing a blazer she had borrowed from me. She looked fierce. Ms. Perez, Dana said, do you recall the night of November 12th? 3 years ago. I do, Marissa said. It was snowing. Harper knocked on my door at 3 a.m. She was shaking. She told me her heat had been turned off, and she had been sleeping in her car. Did she ask her parents for help? She tried, Marissa said. She looked directly at Elaine. I heard the voicemail her mother left. Please read the transcript of that voicemail for the court, Dana requested. Marissa picked up the paper. Her voice didn't waver. Harper, stop calling. We don't have any money to give you. Your father is stressed enough without you begging. If you can't make rent, that is your problem. Don't come back here. The courtroom was silent. Judge Alvarez looked at Elaine. It was a look of pure disgust. Thank you, Ms. Perez, Dana said. The defense's turn was a disaster from the start. Barry tried to argue the family pot theory that money in a family is fluid, and that by improving the parents' life, they were improving Harper's potential inheritance. It was a trickle-down theory, Barry argued weakly. Mr. and Mrs. Mercer were building an estate that Harper would one day inherit. They were investing the funds in the family home. Dana stood up for the rebuttal. Your Honor, trickle-down economics is a political theory, not a legal defense for conversion, and you cannot invest someone's rent money in a kitchen renovation while that person is homeless. Then came the moment that broke the dam. Barry called Kendall to the stand. It was a Hail Mary pass. He wanted Kendall to testify that the family dynamic was supportive, that everyone shared everything. Kendall walked to the stand. She looked like a trapped animal. She had seen the evidence. She had seen the judge's face when the Cabo trip receipts were shown. She knew the ship was sinking. Kendall, Barry asked gently, would you say your parents were generous? Did they share their resources with you and your sister? Kendall looked at Barry. Then she looked at Graham, who gave her a subtle, encouraging nod. Then she looked at me, and then she looked at the judge. Self-preservation is a powerful instinct. Kendall realized that if she lied under oath, she could be charged with perjury. She also realized that if she aligned herself with the losing side, she would go down with them. They were generous with me, Kendall said quietly. And with Harper? Barry asked. Fishing for the lie. Kendall hesitated. She took a breath. No, she said. Barry froze. Excuse me? They weren't generous with Harper, Kendall said, her voice gaining a tremulous strength. They were terrified of her finding out. Objection, Barry shouted. Witness is speculating. Overruled, Judge Alvarez said, leaning forward. Go on, Ms. Mercer. What were they terrified of? Kendall gripped the railing of the witness stand. 2 years ago, before I went to Cabo, I asked Mom if we could afford it. I knew Dad was having trouble at work. Mom told me not to worry because the Harper check had just cleared. The courtroom went deadly still. And then, Kendall continued, tears spilling over. She told me specifically, don't ever mention the money to Harper. If she knows we get it, she will ask for it, and we need it more than she does. A gasp came from the defense table. Elaine had covered her mouth with her hand. Graham looked like he had been shot. She told you to hide it, Dana said, stepping forward to nail the coffin shut. She explicitly instructed you to conceal the funds from the beneficiary. Yes, Kendall whispered. She said Harper was used to being poor, so she wouldn't miss what she never had. Thank you, Dana said. No further questions. That was the nail. That destroyed the misunderstanding defense. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't bad bookkeeping. It was a conspiracy. Finally, Franklin took the stand. He walked slowly, using his cane, but his back was straight. He sat down and adjusted his glasses. He looked at Graham and Elaine with a profound sadness. Mr. Hart, Dana asked softly, why did you send the money? I sent it because my daughter told me Harper was struggling, Franklin said. His voice was deep and resonated off the wood paneling. She told me Harper was sick, that she couldn't hold down a job, that she was in danger of being on the street. And did you intend for that money to be used for vacations? I did not, Franklin said. I intended it for survival. I grew up with nothing. I know what it is to be cold. I sent that money so my granddaughter would never have to be cold. How do you feel knowing it was used for luxury goods? Franklin looked at Graham. I feel foolish, he said. I trusted the wrong people. I thought I was helping my granddaughter. Instead, I was funding a lifestyle my daughter and son-in-law could not earn for themselves. Thank you. Mr. Hart, Dana said. Judge Alvarez looked at the clock. Closing arguments. Barry's closing was a mess. He talked about family unity, about the stress of modern life, about how mistakes were made but without malice. It was word salad. Dana stood up. She didn't use notes. Your Honor, Dana said, this case is simple. It is about a lie that was told 60 times, once a month, for 5 years. She walked to the table where the evidence was stacked. The defendants claimed they were holding the money in trust, but you don't hide a trust from the beneficiary. You don't spend a trust on BMWs. You don't instruct your other daughter to lie about the trust. She turned to point at me. Harper Rodriguez spent 5 years thinking she was a failure. She spent 5 years thinking she wasn't good enough for her family to help her. She froze in a car. She went hungry. She worked herself to the bone. Dana turned back to the judge. While she was starving, they were feasting. While she was freezing, they were sunbathing, and they did it with her money. They didn't just steal $90,000, Your Honor. They stole 5 years of her life. They stole her sense of security. They stole her trust. Dana placed her hand flat on the table. This is fraud. This is conversion. And it was malicious. We ask for full restitution, plus statutory interest, plus punitive damages to ensure that this family never preys on one of their own again. Dana sat down. The silence that followed was heavy. It was the silence of a truth that had finally, after 5 long years, been spoken aloud. Judge Alvarez looked at the papers in front of her. She looked at the 60 transaction lines. She looked at the voicemail transcript. She looked at Kendall's tear-stained face. I have heard enough, Judge Alvarez said. I am ready to issue my ruling. I held my breath. My heart was pounding against my ribs like a trapped bird. I looked at Franklin. He reached over and took my hand. His grip was warm and dry. It's over, he whispered. But as the judge opened her mouth to speak, I realized he was wrong. It wasn't over. The money was just paper. The real verdict was about to be rendered on my parents' souls, and that was a sentence no amount of money could ever overturn. The clerk called out, All rise, and the sound of chairs scraping against the floor echoed like thunder in the small room. I stood up, my legs feeling strangely numb, not from fear, but from the sheer crushing weight of anticipation. It felt as though the last 5 years of my life, every frozen night in my car, every double shift at the diner, every moment of self-doubt were compressed into this single minute. Judge Alvarez swept back into the room, her robes flowing like a dark cloud. She ascended the bench and took her seat. She did not look at the lawyers. She did not look at the weeping woman or the pale man at the defense table. She opened the folder in front of her, adjusted her glasses, and the sound of that single page turning was the loudest thing I had ever heard. It sounded like the page of my life finally turning over. I have reviewed the evidence presented, Judge Alvarez began, her voice devoid of the theatricality that had permeated my parents' defense. I have examined the 60 transaction records. I have reviewed the voicemail transcript. I have considered the testimony regarding the concealment of funds from the plaintiff. She paused, clasping her hands on top of the file. The defense argues that this is a domestic matter, a misunderstanding of family dynamics regarding shared resources. The court rejects this argument entirely. A soft, strangled sob escaped my mother's throat. My father did not move. He was staring at a knot in the wood of the defense table, as if it were a portal to another dimension where he hadn't committed a felony. The law differentiates between a gift and a trust, the judge continued. But more importantly, the law differentiates between management and theft. When funds are designated for a specific beneficiary for the basic necessities of life in this case, shelter and those funds are diverted to luxury expenditures while the beneficiary is destitute. That is not management, that is conversion. She looked directly at Graham. Furthermore, the court finds the testimony of the defendant, Graham Mercer, regarding the fluidity of family finances to be disingenuous at best and perjurious at worst. The evidence shows a systematic, predatory pattern. You did not just spend money that wasn't yours. You engineered a scenario where the plaintiff believed she had no support, thereby ensuring she would not ask questions. She looked down at her ruling. Judgment is entered in favor of the plaintiff, Harper Rodriguez. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. My lungs expanded, hitting my ribs with a sharp ache. The defendants are ordered to pay restitution in the principal amount of $90,000, Judge Alvarez declared. In addition, the court awards prejudgment statutory interest calculated from the date of the first conversion, totaling $18,450. Graham flinched as if he had been physically struck. Furthermore, the judge said, her eyes narrowing, given the finding of malice and the intentional infliction of financial distress, combined with the attempted identity theft evidenced by the credit inquiry, the court awards punitive damages in the amount of triple the principal damages. Triple Barry, the defense lawyer, squeaked. Your Honor, that is excessive. It is the maximum allowed by law, Judge Alvarez snapped, and given that your client submitted a forged medical document to a mediator to discredit the victim, I would award more if the statute allowed it. The total judgment is $360,000, plus legal fees. She banged the gavel. The sound was sharp, final, and absolute. Case closed. The room seemed to tilt. $360,000. It was a number that didn't just mean I was paid back. It meant they were ruined. It meant the house with the marble kitchen was gone. It meant the BMW was gone. It meant the facade was gone. Elaine Mercer collapsed onto the table, her wails filling the room. It wasn't the polite crying of a victim anymore. It was the ugly, raw sound of someone who had lost everything. We can't pay that, she screamed, looking at the judge, then at Franklin. Daddy, please. We will be on the street. We will lose the house. Franklin stood up slowly. He looked at his daughter. His face was not angry. It was just incredibly tired. Then you will know how Harper felt, Franklin said. Graham was frozen. He was doing the math in his head, the lien on the house, the garnishment of his wages, the inevitable firing when this judgment hit the public record and his compliance department saw the fraud finding. He looked at me. His eyes were wide, hollow, stripping away the arrogance that had defined him my whole life. Harper, he whispered across the divide, we are your parents. I looked at him. I looked at the man who told me I needed to build character while he stole my rent. I know, I said. That is why it hurts so much. But I am not the one who did this. You are. I turned my gaze to Kendall. She hadn't moved. She was sitting in the chair behind them, her hands gripping her knees. She wasn't crying. She was staring at me with a look of total shock. For the first time in our lives, she wasn't looking at the big sister who was a failure. She wasn't looking at the scapegoat. She was looking at the person who had just brought down the entire house of cards. There was no smirk, no eye roll, just the terrifying realization that she was alone now. The bank of Mom and Dad hadn't just closed. It had been foreclosed. All rise, the clerk said, as the judge exited. We stood. The energy in the room dissipated, leaving only the wreckage. Dana Kessler closed her binder with a satisfying snap. She didn't smile. She didn't high-five me. She simply picked up her briefcase. The truth does not need to scream, Dana said quietly, echoing the promise she had made me weeks ago. It only needs to be entered into the record, and now it is permanent. Thank you, Dana, I said. Don't thank me, she said. You gave me the bullets. I just pulled the trigger. Franklin walked over to me. He placed his heavy hand on my shoulder. He didn't offer a hug. He didn't offer a celebratory speech. That wasn't his way. "It is done," Franklin said. "It's done," I repeated. "Before we go," Franklin said, reaching into the breast pocket of his suit, "I want you to see this. I found it in my old daily planner from 5 years ago. I kept it because I keep records of everything." He handed me a small, yellowed piece of paper. It was a page torn from a notepad, covered in his jagged, distinctive handwriting. I took it. The date at the top was November 1st, 5 years ago. The exact day I had left home. Call from Elaine, 9:00 a.m. The note read, "Harper has had a breakdown. She is refusing to work. She is threatening to run away and live on the streets. Graham and I are terrified. She needs professional care, but we cannot afford the facility and the apartment she wants. Please, Dad, she is sick. If you send $1,500, we can keep her safe. We can manage her." I stared at the note. They hadn't waited. They hadn't stumbled into the theft. The very morning I left, the morning they kicked me out, my mother had called him. She had invented a breakdown. She had invented a mental illness. She had weaponized their cruelty into a sales pitch. "They planned it," I whispered. "From hour one." "Yes," Franklin said. "They did not just fail you, Harper. They sold you." He took the note back and tucked it into his pocket. "And now," he said, "the transaction is canceled." I looked over my shoulder one last time. Barry was frantically trying to stack papers while Elaine sobbed into Graham's shoulder. Kendall was walking toward the door, keeping her distance from them, already severing ties to survive. I turned my back on them. I walked toward the heavy double doors of the courtroom. I pushed them open, and the air of the hallway hit me. It smelled of nothing. It didn't smell like fear. It didn't smell like poverty. It didn't smell like grease from a diner fryer. It smelled like zero. I walked out of the building and onto the courthouse steps. The city noise washed over me, sirens, traffic, people talking. I took a deep breath. It went all the way to the bottom of my lungs. For 5 years, I had been breathing shallowly, afraid to take up too much space, afraid to exist too loudly. Now, I filled my lungs. I felt light, not the lightness of happiness, exactly, but the lightness of unburdening. I didn't have to prove I was sane anymore. I didn't have to prove I was responsible. I didn't have to prove I was worthy of food or shelter. I was free. I didn't look back at the courthouse windows to see if they were watching. I didn't care. They were part of my history now, like a scar that had finally faded to white. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. I turned off the silent mode. A notification popped up immediately, but it wasn't a text from my mother begging for mercy. It wasn't a nasty comment from a relative. It was a calendar reminder. 2 p.m. Team meeting. Bright Harbor Compliance Group. Subject review of Q4 regulatory audit. I stared at the screen. That was my life, my real life, the one I had built with my own hands, my own brain, and my own resilience. No one had given it to me. No one was holding it for me. I swiped the notification away and opened my email to reply to my boss. "I'm on my way," I said to the empty air. I walked down the steps, my heels clicking a steady, confident rhythm on the concrete, walking away from the family that cost me $90,000, and walking toward the woman who was finally, undeniably, priceless. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from today. Are you listening while driving, cooking, or maybe winding down for the night? Please leave a comment below to share your thoughts and connect with others. If you enjoyed Harper's journey, please subscribe to the Maya Revenge Stories channel, like the video, and hit that hype button to help this story reach even more people. Your support means the world to us.